We'll go ahead and get started. So first off, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I just want to welcome you to today's Finit webinar. We're going to be talking about IDEX today and their project to replace their suite of Hyperion products with a single OneStream application that supports their 40 plus different businesses. So I'm Phil Brosnan. I'm one of the OneStream architects at Finit. I joined Finit about 8 years ago. I came from an automotive manufacturing company, and I went straight into our OneStream practice. So I've been doing OneStream consulting for Finit for the last 8 years.
And I'm Keisha Hilson. I am an implementation manager here at Finit. I've been with Finit for about 4.5 years, have a background in accounting and switched over to financial systems about 7 years ago. Started off working with HFM, FDM, and then moved into DRM, joined Finit and switched to OneStream about 3.5 years ago. So Phil and I were the main Finit team resources on the IDEX project. So we'll let IDEX introduce themselves.
Thanks, Keisha. Hi, everybody. I'm Jackson Chappell. I am the Director of Financial Systems for IDEX. I've been with IDEX for almost 10 years now, which is kind of crazy to say out loud. My background, I got my degree in accounting and quickly realized that wasn't something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. From there, I kind of stumbled into a financial systems role with IDEX, where for the majority of that time, I've worked with Hyperion, and then now for the past 2 years, it's been with OneStream.
And I'm Claire Deaver. I've worked at IDEX for about 5 years now, and I'm the manager of the financial systems team. I also, when I first started, worked with HFM, Essbase, and Hyperion tools, and started working with OneStream during our implementation, and was kind of the main person from IDEX in OneStream building and helping out Keisha and Phil.
Thanks. Now I'll give you guys a little bit of background about IDEX. Chances are you guys have probably never heard of IDEX, but we make thousands of products that are mission critical components in everyday activities. One example is a company called Bandit in Denver, Colorado. This company makes little clamps that hold your airbags in place, and we make these clamps for a lot of major automobile manufacturers. So, a small thing, but pretty important to make sure our airbags are in our cars and working. Another company that you may have heard of is the Hearst Jaws of Life. If you haven't heard of the Jaws of Life, it's a tool used by fire departments around the globe to get into vehicles after there's been an accident if the doors aren't working the way they should be. So, pretty important in life-saving situations. Overall, IDEX is made up of 40 diverse businesses, some of which you can see below in this little image. We have over 7,000 employees around the globe, and we have manufacturing operations in more than 20 countries. So we're over a $2 billion company, and we make trusted solutions that improve lives. And now Keisha is going to tell you guys about Finit.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackson. All right, so I'm going to do a brief overview of Finit for those who may not be familiar with us. So Finit was created in 2002 in an industry that we felt was broken, where a lot of consulting firms are really focused on profit, and we set out to be intentionally different and really putting people over profit. So the foundation of that is focusing on attracting really experienced and effective people to work on our projects with our team, and not only just attracting those people, but retaining those people. So as you can see here, we have over 100 consultants and really a blend of finance and IT experience. Our values and our culture are the DNA of who we are and what we do, and it can be felt in everything that we do. And the word cloud that we have here on this screen, with words like family, experience, collaboration, partnership, those are words that our team members and our clients have used to describe us. So it's really permeated into everything that we do. Our operating model is different. So mentioned a little bit before about having this blend of finance and IT, and actually that's where the name Finit comes from, is that finance and IT. It's the technical and the functional experience together. And with that experience, we've been able to create the largest library of accelerators, and then also a very large library of solutions that we've been able to create for our customers, our clients on OneStream. So when you work with Finit, you're not going to be starting at ground zero. You really have a base on which to build, to move forward and tailor it to your particular needs. We've got a partnership approach. And so what that means is that we align everything that we do to client success. So a number of our competitors out there in the consulting industry are really focused on evaluating their consultants on chargeable hours and utilization, and that's not what we do at Finit. We are focused on compensating and evaluating our consultants on client satisfaction. What that means for you is that we go beyond the build on our projects. It's not about charging the hours, it's about getting the outcome that we need to get on the projects. It also means that we freely share information. So there's not this competitive nature amongst us. We really work together. So when you engage with Finit, you're not just getting your project team, you're getting all of Finit, because we're all sharing that knowledge amongst all of us. We have 100% client success, and so that's over 275 plus OneStream projects with over 100 OneStream clients. So as you can see, that number is leaning on the project side, and that's because we've built and fostered these long-term partnerships with our clients, so that the initial implementation is not the first and last engagement that we have with them. They continue to come back to us as they continue to grow and change in their business. So we're really proud of those long-standing relationships that we build. And then that's led to us becoming a market leader with OneStream. So we have the highest partnership level with OneStream, and that's the diamond level partnership. And to give a little bit of context on that, you need 25 projects to be a diamond level partner, and we have 275. So we're 11 times diamond partner. So clearly in quantity and quality of OneStream projects, we're head and shoulders above our next closest US competitor. And all those things are great, and we're really proud of them, but really what we're truly proud of is being able to do all that while also treating our team members as family. And so that's meant that we've never had layoffs. We have a very low turnover rate, and we have a long tenure here with our team members. So very proud and excited to have been awarded Fortune Best Workplace and Great Place to Work numerous times. So very excited to have everyone here today and talk about what we were able to accomplish with IDEX. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. And on the panel off to the right-hand side of your screen, there is a section for questions. Please feel free throughout the webinar to enter your questions in that box, and we'll answer those as we can throughout the webinar. And if not, we'll have a question and answer session at the end if there's time. And if not, we'll be sure to get back to you after the webinar to answer those questions directly. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start off with taking a look at the legacy footprint of Hyperion that IDEX had in their environment, go through an overview of the project, do some highlights of what we did and how we accomplished those things, and then talk about some key benefits that IDEX was able to realize as they went live with OneStream, and then again, do some Q&A at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackson.
All right, thanks, Keisha. So as you guys know from the name of this webinar, before moving to OneStream, we were a Hyperion shop. So we used HFM for consolidations. And then we had two larger Essbase applications that we used for management reporting, and one of them for commercial sales reporting, which never really caught on the way we had hoped it would. And then we also use FDM-EE for loading and mapping data. And I'm not going to go into too much of the details of what this diagram is on here, because it kind of gives me a little bit of PTSD, a reminder of the struggles that we had with Hyperion. But I do want to draw your attention to all the all the different boxes and all the different arrows going every which way on this diagram. So each one of these boxes and every line was another layer of complexity for us. And since we had multiple tools, we were constantly moving data from one place to another, which meant as admins, we spent a lot of our time, Claire especially, tying out data between the different tools. And then even though we had a standard process to move the data, it seemed like every month end something would go wrong, a job would get stuck, data wasn't tying, we'd have to call the data center and ask them to reboot the servers, and it was kind of turned into a nightmare for us. And it actually ended up the point where we had somebody in corporate FP&A who had a tie-out file that was constantly refreshing this file throughout the close because themselves and our other users didn't really trust that the data was accurate, which is obviously a huge problem from a system standpoint. So if we move on to the next slide here, you can see we had a bunch of issues and challenges. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but at the end of the day, having various tools caused a lot of confusion on where to go for what data, not just for our users, but also for us. So a couple of things I do want to specifically call out are a lot of things were being done offline because the system couldn't facilitate what our businesses wanted. And our users struggled to learn how to use all the different tools, right? The add-in for HFMs works slightly different than how it does for Essbase, and there's all these small differences, makes getting familiar with the tools really tricky. And the last thing I wanted to reiterate on here that was a huge issue for us was that we were constantly moving data during the close, and it was never clear when our data was moved from HFM and when it was updated in Essbase, which led to us just answering constant questions from users about why their data didn't look right. And sometimes the answer was simply just, oh, the data hasn't moved yet because it took about 30 minutes to move from one tool to the other. And then unfortunately, sometimes it was, well, there's something failed out again. And like I said before, we have to ask our team to reboot the servers to just kind of give everything a restart. And as we move on to the next slide here, we'll talk about why OneStream. So there's a couple of reasons that we really wanted to move to OneStream and really like about OneStream. And first is a scalability. So having the marketplace solutions and being able to just go out and download those for free is great. We're actually currently in the process of implementing the account rec module so that we can retire Blackline, which we're currently using for reconciliations. Also with OneStream, we feel as new business requirements come up, we're going to be able to pretty easily build that into our existing application. A big part of this is because we didn't just do a lift and shift from HFM. Kind of took a step back. We looked at what worked, what didn't, and then we tried to plan the best we could for future projects. So the second reason for OneStream on here is the information delivery. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that most people on this call over the last couple of years are getting asked for data visualizations more and more. That seems to be the new kind of trend. So we found with OneStream that they do have a really rich dashboarding capability that makes consuming the data a lot easier, right, than if you were just looking at kind of a standard report. But there's definitely still a place for standard reports and ad hoc reporting, which OneStream is also very efficient with. So it's kind of like a pick your poison with OneStream. Do you want that, slick looking dashboard? Do you need a standard report? Do you want that quick ad hoc tool in Excel that you can build your own reports with? And lastly for us was the data integrity. So I mentioned this already, but in our whole Hyperion ecosystem, people spend a lot of time Frankensteining reports together from our various different tools, and also spending time making sure that the data tied. And when they're spending time doing that, that meant that they weren't spending time where they should be, which is actually analyzing the data. So not having to worry about tying data between multiple tools really makes our end users able to spend more time analyzing the data versus gathering and tying out, which is huge for us. So at the end of the day, we were confident that being able to do everything we wanted to do in one tool would be ideal for our end users, right? Because it's only one tool that they have to use or learn versus a bunch of different ones. And from an admin standpoint, having everything in one place was going to be a lot easier, right? The opening and the closing and the rolling of the month, you only have to do in one place versus multiple places. And on our next slide here, we have our first poll question for you guys. So how adverse to change is your user base? So if we want to start the poll, say either our users welcome change, our users are okay with change as long as it adds value, or our users struggle with change. Give you guys a couple more seconds to get your answers in. All right, so here's the results. It looks like you guys are pretty much like our users. So our users are okay with change as long as it adds value, is 66%. Only 6% welcome change, and then 28% struggle with change. So this kind of takes us into our project timeline. Like most of you, it looks like our users are okay with change as long as it's going to be good for them. Nobody wants change that's going to make their lives worse or more work. And on our project timeline, you can see we got started in January 2019, and from the highest level, our requirements from our CFO was essentially build something that our business units will use. So we took a little bit of a different approach. We did the meetings with our corporate groups and started out our requirements gathering. But then you might notice that on this timeline, we have 2 prototypes, which is probably not normal on a implementation timeline. So this approach is definitely a little different, but we think it really helped to make the project a success for IDEX. And what we did was we got together a good cross-section of our businesses. For us, that meant a couple of US businesses, a couple of non-US businesses, some of our businesses that use JDE as their ERP, which about half of our company does, and then a few business units that did not use JDE and just use whatever source system they were on when they were acquired by IDEX. To make sure we were building something that would benefit the business units, we started with what we knew we needed and what we thought we wanted, or what we thought they wanted, based on things that people had asked for over the years that we couldn't give to them previously in Hyperion. And we actually built that into OneStream and showed that to them during the first prototype. Now, this wasn't a full-on build, it's more kind of a skeleton, but it was enough of a build where people could get the idea of how things were going to work in OneStream and how they were going to look inside of there. So we did that first prototype, we got feedback from them, and for the next 2 months or so, we kind of went back and we incorporated all the requests. And then that second prototype was around the June time. So in addition to having our businesses with us, we also had our senior management in the crowd for that presentation because they wanted to hear from the businesses that we were addressing all their needs. And luckily, things went pretty well and we got the thumbs up to move on with the project. So from there, you can see we kind of went into the majority of the build, and that took us through till kind of the March timeframe. And one other interesting thing to throw on here, or to look at on here, is our go live. So our go live date was, we planned for May of 2020. We had big plans to go on a global training roadshow in March and April. Finit was going to come with us. We were going to go train all of our business units in person, and then COVID hit. So obviously traveling anywhere was kind of off the table. And actually our CFO came to us and asked if we thought we should push the go live. We thought about that, but we decided everything was going pretty smooth, and we decided to keep on moving forward. So we did have to quickly pivot our training plan. We started to record everything that we were going to present in person. And it turned out that this actually was a big hit with our users, because now we had this recorded training that they could pause, they could rewind, they could rewatch, and do it all on their own time. So that kind of changed the way that we've looked at training going forward. I think going forward, hopefully we'd love to do stuff in person with our business units and build those relationships, but we'll definitely still always be recording these so people can watch them on their own time. So we might have been a little crazy for going live with a big OneStream implementation in the middle of a global pandemic, but at the end of the day, I feel like everything went really smooth, and I'm glad we did move forward instead of kind of pumping the brakes and pushing things back. I'm going to take a little break from talking here and give it over to Keisha to talk about some of the Finit project accelerators.
Hey, Jackson, a couple of questions that have come in that we could probably hit on this slide.
Sure.
Can you confirm, did you guys use planning or just Essbase?
Just Essbase, no planning.
And then was the replacement of both HFM and Essbase part of this phase 1 project?
Yes, it was. Yep. So HFM was mostly just our consolidation. We'd had some of our management reporting in one of the big Essbase cube, and all of that was in this phase 1 of the project, putting all of that into OneStream together.
Yep. And then one I think I can knock off here. There's a question about the JDE integration and the ERP landscape. There is a direct connect to JDE, which is the primary ERP, but like many companies and like what Jackson showed on his IDEX overview slide, IDEX has a ton of different companies. So yeah, Keisha or Jackson, what percentage would you say is on JDE versus the myriad of other ERPs?
It's about 50-50 these days. Our JDE team at IDEX is slowly converting some of the other businesses over, but it stays around the 50% mark with the new implementations that the JDE team does, plus the acquisitions that IDEX does.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Excellent. Keep the questions coming. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about some accelerators. So I alluded to this earlier while I was going through the Finit intro, and so we'll highlight some of the accelerators that we used with IDEX now. So the first of which, and maybe the most popular, is our reconciliation toolkit. So data conversion and reconciliation of historical data is one of the really major pieces of the puzzle when you have an implementation from system to system. So we've developed a toolkit, and this is something that we developed when we were really heavy into doing Hyperion implementations, and we've been able to transition that into OneStream. But it's an Excel-based tool that allows us to refresh data from the legacy system and the new system and call out the variances between the data sets. So it really helps speed the time of figuring out where those discrepancies are so that you can spend your time figuring out the why behind the what. Next is our HFM metadata utility. So again, an Excel-based tool that we have to pull out the metadata from HFM, put it into Excel, look at it in the hierarchy view, and it has all of the properties of those metadata members in there. And then you can also do updates on those members, extract it from this tool, and then load it back up into HFM. So we're not doing the loading process in this project, but definitely viewing the metadata and getting things ready. And then we have a OneStream metadata utility as well that we could pull that metadata from HFM, get it into OneStream, and then use this metadata utility tool to do bulk updates during the create stage of the project and really facilitate some more efficient metadata changes as we are going along. Next is a converter that we had for FDME maps into OneStream transformation rules. So we were using this to convert all of the maps that we had, inclusive of some of those changes that we were talking about, or Jackson said that we weren't doing a lift and shift. So there were some dimension movements and changes that we made, but we were able to use this converter to really help us realize that more efficiently. Next, we have an HFM journal converter. So one unique thing out of the myriad of unique things that IDEX has is that there was a requirement to have a full year of journals loaded as journals in OneStream. So we use this Excel-based tool to take that JLF file, convert those into OneStream journals, and then be able to load those in as journals in OneStream. And then last is our reported solution. So there is a webinar that we did on this solution, I want to say maybe like a couple months ago, and there's a link to more information on reported on the next slide. But this is to help look at security reporting, do audits, and troubleshoot things. That was really helpful. IDEX has about 400 or so users, so getting the security set up, and then as we were going through parallel testing, making sure that everything was working properly, this really helps with that. And then also with their quarterly security reviews. So that's something that many companies do, and so this helps facilitate that reporting. Some of the benefits that were realized. So I talked about reported on the previous slide. There's a link there to more information on that solution. That's a Finit created solution to enhance the out-of-box security reporting in OneStream. And the next is cash flow forecasting. So we've got a blog with more information on this, and also a webinar that Phil facilitated, I want to say in the fall or summer, on the cash forecasting solution that we did at IDEX, and then a couple other clients that we did that for. So that was out of a need for more analysis during the beginning and the height of the pandemic, of just understanding cash positioning and how the business was going to be able to weather that storm. So more information via the links there. We did some insurance of segregation of duties by preventing double certification. So we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in some upcoming slides. We did some improvement on entity management and reporting through workflow filters. So if you're not familiar with OneStream, there's this concept of workflow, and that's how all data gets into OneStream. And it also helps facilitate walking the user through whatever process they're going through. So that could be a close or a forecast process or budget process, and kind of lays out the steps that they need to complete as part of that process. So we were able to incorporate some improved entity management, and we'll talk about some of the challenges on the entity dimension in some slides upcoming, but really streamline that for the users of understanding what they needed to pull and when through that enhancement. We have confirmation rules to make sure that people do things right the first time. So we'll talk about some of the other ways that we ensured that the data was in good quality, but confirmation rules is an out-of-the-box functionality with OneStream where you can stop people from moving forward in the process if their data is not correct. There's no more waiting for data to move between these different tools, and no tying out. Jackson was talking about the amount of time that they spent tying out data and answering questions from their users about data moving back and forth. So no more with that. There's an ease of opening and closing the period for the admins. So I'm sure Jackson and Claire could talk about that for quite a while of how different it is in OneStream. We did some organic reporting that we'll look at in a little bit in some subsequent slides in more detail. Same with management variance analysis. We'll talk about how we were doing some variance analysis in OneStream now, and then also the ability to enter, store, and consolidate commentary in OneStream. Okay, so that's bulleted list of some of the things, and we'll do some deep dives coming up next on some of these solutions.
All right, so our first solution spotlight here, we're going to talk about how we prevent double certification. That's kind of a word that we made up, so I'll explain that a little bit here. One of our requirements from audit was that the system had to enforce a segregation of duties. And what I mean by that is they wanted to make sure that if somebody went in and certified at a base input workflow, that same person couldn't also certify the review workflow, right? So they want to make sure that there's at least two hands on the data. The way that we had process control set up in Hyperion, we couldn't stop the same person from promoting the data. So this was kind of a bad design on our part, but also kind of the way that it had to be for everybody to be able to see the data when they wanted to. So when we said we were going to be able to do this in OneStream, this was going to be a big improvement from an audit perspective. And there was nothing really out of the box that was going to work for us. So Finit helped us create these custom rules that we put on all the review workflows. And just to make things a little bit easier for our businesses, that was really only an audit requirement for our actuals. So in other scenarios where we don't really care as much about that double certification, we don't have those rules on there. So it's flexible enough to be where you want it versus everywhere in the application. So now when somebody tries to go in to a review workflow, and if they try to certify, OneStream will go and look at that user, and it's going to check and see if that same user certified the base input workflow below it. And as we move on to the next slide here, you'll see if that does happen, they'll get this error here that pops up. This is, you can put whatever wording you want in there. We just kind of came up with this generic wording, but it's pretty slick. This has been a big hit with our internal audit group. And I'm not sure our end users like it because it's kind of telling them that they can't do something that they're trying to do. But at the end of the day, it's working exactly how we want it to. So we're super happy with this.
Thanks, Jackson. So as we lead into kind of our next section, we've got another poll question for you here. So what we want to understand is, does your company in their reporting, do you exclude certain portions or segments of the business that are either acquisition or divestiture related to get cleaner year-over-year comparability? So if we want to open the poll question, and feel free to answer. We'll leave this open for a minute or two, and then we'll see what this looks like. Okay, so we're sitting right at about 3/4 say yes. The people who answered yes answered a lot more quickly than the people who answered no. But it settled in at about 75%. So yeah, that kind of leads to, and I mean, if you think back to what Jackson talked about in the introduction slides for IDEX, I mean, you saw that myriad of company logos representing different companies that IDEX owns that were largely acquired over time, because acquisitions of these small kind of niche, jaws of life type companies, that's a major component of IDEX's corporate strategy. So, but that does create some reporting challenges because it's not always clear if a business is growing organically, if they're simply growing through acquisition. So prior to OneStream, this type of analysis was done offline, and it was sometimes done inconsistently because different business segments would do it differently, which made consolidation reporting quite difficult. So in OneStream, what we've done is created a solution to identify and segregate any of the acquisition activity. It also works for divestitures, but we tend to think in terms of acquisitions. So that IDEX can basically isolate the organic results and report on that separate from the acquisition results, in addition to the normal reporting, which would be on the combined results. So if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of talk about two major components of this. So what we used was OneStream's out-of-the-box time-varying member properties on entities to record the fiscal period when the acquisition was first made. So it becomes essentially an acquisition at that point in time. And then the fiscal period when the acquisition should start being treated as organic, which is typically 12 months later, but could be more or could be less. A nice thing about this is that this time varying attribute properties are just standard OneStream functionality, so there's nothing special there. And the admin doesn't have to remember, like 12 months later, I need to flip a flag. We can put these properties in on the day of the acquisition, on the same day that the entity gets created in the metadata. Create the entity, put in its acquisition date, talk to the business. When do you think this is going to be organic? They say 12 months out. You put that in at the same point in time. Now, if that changes, you can always go back and update it. And if for some reason they want the acquisition period to be shorter or longer than 12 months, that's fine also. So in this example, they could just as easily have this become organic in like 2017 M4 or M2, or maybe try to align it with a quarter. So that flexibility is in there.
Phil, if I can interrupt you there, we actually had an example of that this year. So in 2020, February 29th, we had an acquisition that signed, right before midnight, very close. So we kind of had to throw it in there for our February close. But in terms of kind of our actual reporting, we wanted to kind of keep the acquisition period to be 13 months. So recently we had to kind of update our time just to add a month where they're considered organic. And from an admin perspective, it was really easy. And our users were super happy that they really didn't need to do anything. They just requested that the acquisition time be a little bit longer, and we were able to facilitate that within a couple of minutes.
Nice. Good. Yeah, so then once we've got this metadata in place, which is really all the admin has to maintain is the metadata, they don't ever have to go into a rule. But we do then have rules that pick up those varying, time varying member properties to populate a couple of specific UD2 members. So we calculate effectively the impact of the acquisitions or the impact of the divestitures. And that gets added, those values get backed out essentially from the normal results or the comprehensive results, which are here represented by the member that says post-passback. So this allows you to basically see results either with or without the impact of those acquisitions. So I kind of talked about like the with and without, and you can almost think of that as like in isolation. So just in the current month, what was my organic sales versus my acquisition sales? But where it really becomes powerful is we can use that same information to help classify variances correctly when we're doing variance analysis. So in your organization, you may refer to this as a walk or a bridge or a waterfall. IDEX uses the term PBIT walk. And Claire's going to talk about this, the overall PBIT walk in more detail. But I just want to highlight that when we're doing this bridge or this walk from prior year to current year, or it could be planned to actual or whatever your needs are, we're able to isolate out the impact of the acquisitions, and it basically becomes its own line item in the walk, so that the underlying volume mix pricing analysis is really only done on the organic activity. So you don't get this clouded message where it says, oh, volume's way up. Well, that's just because we bought somebody. It's not because our volume is really up. So that's kind of what we were doing with acquisition and divestiture, which kind of leads into our next next poll question is, we'd like to understand a little more about how your company analyzes variances to plan forecast, but if it helps for you, you could think of this as prior year to current year, forecast to actual, whatever works for you. But this idea of a walk or a bridge or a waterfall to analyze variances. So we'll go ahead and open this poll up.
Thanks, Phil. And once that closes up, I will take over and talk about the results. All right, perfect. So it looks like everyone's in. The majority of you guys at almost 50% said that variance amounts in a system, but the comments are offline. And 31% of you guys said variance amounts and comments are both offline. Well, going into our next slide, that's what I'm going to start talking about, is because we actually had both of those problems as well. So as Jackson mentioned, we had a lot of limitations with our HFM products and our Essbase Cube. So one of the priorities when we went into this implementation is not only to build a system that was effective for corporate accounting and external reporting, but how also can we get this management reporting and our internal FP&A reporting? How do we get these people what they need as well? So we've had two big management variance analysis projects that we've worked on and that we've been able to take from offline Excel and move it into OneStream where people are actually using it. So the first one I want to talk about is the PBIT walk that Phil mentioned earlier. Again, this is just a walk of our profit. We do it from our prior year to our current year actuals. We do it from our plan to our current year actuals. And within OneStream, we've even been able to walk to our forecast, what we predict for the full year in a mid-year forecast. So one of the big challenges that we faced is our entity structure in OneStream. So if you look to the image on the right side of the screen, the one on the top, you can see this is how our entity structure is set up. And we actually have cost centers that roll up into this legal entity or a parent entity. The problem with that being, if you look at just one of those cost centers, that doesn't embody the full business. That doesn't give you a full picture of your financials. So we have to be able to look at that legal entity number in order to do all of our reporting, which when you're running a cube view and you have the ability to kind of switch your point of view, that's not a problem. But when you're looking at a walk, you want the start of that walk to be that complete entity. So that was a big problem that we faced in our previous tools because we weren't able to have any flexibility with that. So in OneStream, we were able to leverage the text fields, which is equivalent to a UDA member. We were able to leverage those text fields in order to say, hey, we want maybe to load the walk at a base level entity, because we all know you have to load at a base level entity. But the numbers we're actually walking, those bookends of our from number to our to number, we want those to be a consolidated number, a parent entity. So again, using those text fields, we were able to tag the different entities. So that way we were able to pull in the legal entity amount that you see on the screen, but we were also able to be flexible and use these management reporting hierarchies too, because although probably about 60 to 75% of our businesses, they look at their legal entity, we do also use a lot of management reporting. So if you look at the second image on the screen, you'll see kind of an example of what our management reporting looks like. It's the same, the base level entities, but split into different management hierarchies. And so some of our units wanted to be able to report or do their PBIT walks at either the management 1 or the management 2, or even the total management entity for the PBIT walk, but that just wasn't possible in our previous tools. So now we've been able to give them the flexibility of choosing what entity do you want to walk and what's going to be most beneficial for your business. And then another problem that we had with the PBIT walk previously was a lack of control on how the data was entered, meaning that if we allowed one input for a certain account, it had to be inputable on all accounts. So if we flip to the next slide, you'll see here in OneStream, we were able to limit where the data was inputable to where it made sense. So the most easy example for me to understand this is if you look in the middle of the screenshot, you'll see 3 columns that start with DMI, and that stands for direct material inflation. Given its direct material inflation, it should really only apply to our material accounts. So as you can see, in those 3 columns, the only place where you're able to input numbers is in the material line. And how we did this was we didn't use any complicated channels or anything like that with the workflow, but we just used a simple no input rule, which is easy for anyone to follow and also very easy to leverage or or update going forward. If, say, we added in another DMI column, it would be very simple to go in there and update the no input rule. And it allows us to focus on where the intersections actually need to be and where people should actually be inputting data, which was a big problem in our Hyperion system, where people would kind of just load to intersections that didn't really make sense. And if we can move on to the next slide. So our next big management variant analysis win that we've done in OneStream is our weekly forecast. So every month, our units will create a new forecast and update what they expect to happen for the next month. However, previously, we also had what we call weekly updates, where people would say, okay, this is what I expect for March at the beginning of the month. And then each week they would say, well, this happened, so I expect to actually have my sales number be this number for March. And previously, everyone was doing that via Excel. So each business unit would fill out an Excel template that had their orders, sales, PBIT, and working capital amounts, where they expected to come in for the month. And then those would get manually consolidated at a group level, a segment level, and even a corporate level. So at that point, you had 4 people touching it, consolidating these Excel files in order to get a total corporate number or to get that visibility at the different corporate or segment levels. As you can imagine, these are FP&A leads and corporate FP&A people spending their time retyping numbers, figuring out where the Excel formula maybe have gone wrong, or if somebody uses different format. And overall, there was no value add, and the time that it took to get this analysis was quite a bit. And you can imagine this is done 2 to 3 times a month, every month. So it's obviously a huge time suck. And previously in Hyperion, it wasn't even an option because we used commentary. So people will put in their variances to forecast, then they'll comment on what that variance is. So once we went live on OneStream, was brought to us to see if we could build this into OneStream. It was actually after our go live, and we faced 2 different challenges with it. The first one was the entity challenge that we talked about in the PBIT walk. People wanted to be able to forecast at different levels. They didn't want to just do the base level, because as we know, that base level doesn't always, have a full picture of our business. And we'd have to do a lot of base levels in order to get that full picture. So we were able to leverage what Finit provided and the solution that Finit provided for the PBIT walk for this new weekly forecast. So the businesses were able to tell us, hey, this is the entity that I want to forecast my data at. And then even better, it was different than, it wasn't always the same as the entity at which they wanted to do their PBIT walk at. So we were able to put in both so people could get exactly what they wanted and to remain flexible. And then if we can go to the next slide, this is a good example of ADS is one of our businesses that's looked at one total business, but has 3 smaller businesses underneath. So again, we wanted to give the business flexibility to load at one level or at all multiple sub-business levels. So with ADS, the LLC is our US team, Australia is our Australia team, and Canada is our Canadian team. So they're all able to go in and load their individual inputs, and you'll see that in the current week input. But this view also gives the total ADS finance manager the visibility to come in here and say, you know what, I actually think that this 100,000, that should be 200,000, or that should be 50,000. So it gives visibility throughout the business, and also ease of just going in and inputting and checking, as opposed to navigating 2, 3 different workflows and having to see what they put for their input. And then also you can see in the 4th column our commentary. So the different businesses inputted their commentary, which is great, but at the total ADS level, if we have 60 or so different businesses that are being aggregated up, a lot of these surprise order postponed by the client, those will get very long and hard to read and hard to interpret where those variances are actually coming from. So something that our units requested was the ability to load commentary at a consolidated level. So you can see at the ADS console, which is a parent level entity, you are also able to load commentary. So that way, again, our finance manager at the ADS consolidated level, who's in charge of all ADS, he could come in here and kind of make one comment that embodied the comments of the three businesses beneath, but was a little bit more succinct. And then if we can move to the next slide. So as we started, we did realize that commentary, we needed to aggregate it up. We needed to see it. We wanted our corporate levels to see it. We wanted our different segment leads to see it. So we set up a typical kind of out of the box, what I think Finit and OneStream normally does for commentary aggregation. And you'll see that in the middle section, in the middle column here in this screenshot. And the out of the box solution is great, but unfortunately it just didn't really work for us because we had so many different levels of businesses loading in data. And you can see environmental services is the equivalent of kind of our ADS consolidated level. And that's only 3 or 4 different businesses. And you can see how long that comment already is in that environmental services consolidated comment, because it was aggregating all of the comments underneath it, as well as tagging it with a certain entity. So if you extrapolate this out and think about it in terms of 40 to 60 different businesses, that consolidated comment would be way too overwhelming for anybody to read and interpret. So what we did was we created a new kind of commentary aggregation, what we call the dynamic aggregation. And we leveraged what Finit had provided with us with the normal aggregation and tweaked it to get what we needed, which was what we wanted to do was say, hey, OneStream, can you look at this entity and see what the commentary is there? If there is commentary that was entered, pull that over. If not, aggregate the children beneath it. So what you'll see here is if we start at the bottom with Canada, we see that it pulled in the Canadian comment. Same with Singapore, New Zealand, and Australia. Those are the 4 bottom lines on this screenshot. And then at ADS International, which is a parent to those 3, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, instead of aggregating up those comments, it looked over and it pulled over international comments. So you can see in the overridden comment where, the overridden comment column, that it's not aggregating, it's just pulling in that parent commentary where we loaded that. But if we go up to the US level, you'll see that we inputted LLC comment at ADS LLC console. But at ADS US, there was no commentary loaded. So instead of being blank, in the overridden column, it actually pulled up the children. So it pulled in that ADS LLC comment, so you could pull your reporting at any level and still get the commentary that you needed. And then finally, at environmental services, which again is that kind of consolidated level, that's the group comment. Instead of aggregating all of the children beneath it, it just looks over and pulls in the comment from at the top. So this allowed for our reporting and our executives to get our group leaders and our executives to kind of go in and say, hey, ADS, I see all your sub comments, but I'm going to put one in that I want to keep rolling and keep aggregating up. So allowed for much cleaner reporting and much more effective as opposed to kind of interpreting the full aggregation amount.
And I think
with
this
that,
is key, Claire, that the aggregation or consolidation of comments is like a hot ticket item in OneStream that everyone asks about. And so that middle column really gives you a look of, be careful what you wish for, because this could really get out of hand. And to give a little bit of context for the audience, IDEX has over 3,000 base entities, with those cost centers being in the entity dimension. So think about if we were looking at the top of IDEX with all those comments, and that's just at base, so it could really get out of hand. So that last column is really the streamlined version of getting the information that you want. You can still get to that consolidated comment if you wanted to, and then drill down also if you wanted to, but it really streamlines it for you. Excellent. So let's look at some success indicators. So we did a little bit of a spotlight on some of the solutions that we were able to help IDEX realize with OneStream, and definitely not all inclusive, but some of the key indicators of success throughout this project was a lower total cost of software. So obviously you want to get those costs down with having enhancements in your tools. We were on time and on budget. So Jackson talked about this a little bit earlier. We have a direct linkage between different types of data. So we talked about having that connector from JDE into OneStream, but then it's also having all of your data in one tool was really key to the OneStream project. We're shrinking that time from data to insight. So we're talking about all the time spent moving data between tools and tying things out, having things in Excel, and employing OneStream and the functionality and the customization that we were able to realize really decrease that time that people were spent or being spent on non-value added activities, right? We have customization for their BU specific needs. So obviously this is something unique to IDEX of having this decentralized model and really letting their BUs decide what they need for their specific needs. So we were able to have that be a part of our OneStream design as well, leading to happy users, and not only happy users, but happy and confident admins. So as you can see throughout the things that they were highlighting here today, the IDEX team has been very involved throughout all of the builds of OneStream, really they're side by side with the Finit team. And our most successful clients take that approach of really getting their hands dirty and being a part of the process. And it really is a testament to their ability to pick up OneStream and really get into the trenches with us. So when it came time for parallels and testing, they were the front lines of support and we were just there to kind of support them. So they talked about how they were taking things that we gave them and then kind of took it a next level. So that's really indicative of the abilities that they have and how self-sufficient they are. And then last here, we have the scalable design. So really giving a platform design that's able to grow and change with your business as you do. So that's at the forefront of our minds when we go into these OneStream implementations of creating a flexible environment for you to continue to grow on top of that. And to that end, we've kind of gone through the phase one of this OneStream implementation, but Jackson mentioned earlier some of the things that they've been doing since go live in May. So we had equity pickup that we put in that went live last month. They're currently working on account reconciliations, which is a marketplace solution from OneStream. So that's replacing Blackline. So they're currently doing parallels for that at this time, going live next month. And then we're also doing some work with Analytic Blend, which is some new OneStream functionality to help you unify your financial and your operational data together in your OneStream environment without affecting the performance of your application. So we're in an SME capacity working on that piece of the phase two, doing some designing and prototyping for that. And then, as we said, IDEX is very self-sufficient. So we're working on a design together, and then they're going to roll it out to the rest of their businesses throughout the rest of 2021. Excellent. Let's move on to question and answer. So I'll give it over to Phil, call out some of the questions that we have in the question box.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions. Not sure we'll get through all of them, but we'll definitely get back to everyone who asked a question. We'll talk about a few of these. I think I can handle the first couple. So one of them from Steve is, how did IDEX handle weekly data collection, consolidation, and reporting relative to the time dimension in OneStream? So for IDEX, weeks are built into the time dimension. So OneStream kind of, your vanilla out of the box will be 12 months rolling up into quarters, half years, and years. But OneStream has the ability to basically extend that time dimension down to weeks. So when we originally created the application, we designed it to have weeks rolling to months rolling to quarters and years above that. It was a tiny bit tricky with IDEX because when they think in terms of weeks, they think from Sunday through Saturday, but they're not on a 445 calendar. They're on a regular calendar month end close. So when you think about months, months always start on the first and end on the last day of the month. So there were little challenges in there where we had, okay, well, we've got a week, but we really need to split that week into two pieces so that we align it with the month and have a tie out effectively back to the month end numbers. So we had a lot of kind of partial weeks, I guess you would say. So if the month ended on a Wednesday, we'd have a Sunday through Wednesday, and then Thursday through Saturday would start the next month. But that was built into the time dimension, which is fantastic because it lets you use all the pre-built OneStream capabilities around the view dimension. So if you wanted to see, you know, a month to date or a quarter to date or a year to date number through the first 10 weeks of the year, it's perfectly, that's just standard functionality. So yeah, definitely anybody who's looking at a new implementation, if you think you have weekly reporting requirements, definitely talk about that early in your cycle to see whether you want to build that directly in. Another question from Irene around no input rules, and can those be tagged to specific entities or just to accounts? The easiest way to think about no input rules is it's actually at an intersection of data. So we can have individual members, like maybe we have a calculated account and we don't want people to input to it, like let's say CTA. You can definitely tag that individual member at the member level to say this is not valid for input. But typically it's at an intersection where we say for this entity, for these accounts, they can only use these UD1 members. But for this other range of accounts, they can use a different UD1 member. And that's the nice screenshot that Claire showed of being able to limit, you know, the direct material inflation walk buckets are only valid for the material account. So it's really at the intersection of those two dimensions. And that's what the no input rules really let you do. And OneStream is really nice because there's kind of a grid you can just fill out and do kind of in a more human readable form. It's just a table. But if you have things that are really complex, you can write no input rules like you would have in HFM as well. So it supports both a simplistic interface and the more powerful rule writing. Okay, I'll shut up now and let IDEX talk. So one of the questions again from Steve was workflow, or the concept of workflow, used in the previous Hyperion environment? And how far did IDEX utilize workflow in OneStream, and what was the experience for the users and admins?
Sure, I'll take that one, and Claire, you can pipe in too. So we didn't really have any type of workflow in Hyperion, and that was part of what made training our end users so tricky, right? Because it was kind of like you go to HFM and go into data forms to load your day one information, but then in day 4 you have to go into FDM, and then you load your data, that loads your data to HFM, so then you go back to HFM, and then you wait 30 minutes to get your data in Essbase. So we really didn't have any type of workflow in HFM. So that was actually a huge win for us when we did make the change to OneStream. I don't know how much you've seen of workflow in OneStream, but it kind of makes it hard to do the wrong thing, right? So there's kind of a specific order that you have to go in, and if you're not doing something right, you kind of get that, you know, big red X on your screen saying something's wrong, and you can't proceed to the next step until you fix whatever you're working on. So I think from a training perspective, it's a lot easier for our end users to pick up on, again, because it's kind of intuitive and it kind of guides you in the right direction that you should be going.
Yeah, I can add one more thing on there. Confirmation rules are incredible. I don't know, I've said this multiple times since we went live, I don't know how he lives without them, especially in a business like IDEX where we're so decentralized. Like our corporate accounting team cannot monitor every single business and every single input that they're doing. And now if they're something small where they need to tie out their sales, if they don't do that data form correctly, they can't move forward. They can't certify their data. And then not only are they able to not have to do rework down the road, they get a quick, hey, you gotta go fix this. The error tells them exactly what needs to be fixed, so on and so forth. Our corporate accounting team isn't spending their time going through all these things that they need to be correct for our external reporting, and then having to go back to the businesses and, uncertified workflows or, push back down or unpromote and, Hyperion speak to get them to fix their data. It's correct when they certify, which again, I could speak about confirmation rules for a long time.
And for some context really quickly here, so IDEX was using process control management in HFM, but they weren't using the validation accounts. So they didn't have any hard stops on any promotion. So they were spending time with their corporate accounting team. People would promote up and then corporate accounting would go look at the data. They'd have these validation reports without any system stops to keep people from promoting up. So corporate accounting was going back after the fact and chasing things down. So that's a little bit of context to the from environment in HFM to the new OneStream.
Okay, thanks. A couple of related ones, and I think this is just a clarification. Zuzana and Suresh Kumar kind of want to, if you can talk about when your fiscal year end is compared to what the go live date was. I think the saying we went live in May may be causing a bit of confusion. So you can talk, just clarify a little bit about how go live related to fiscal and quarter month ends.
Sure. So we are on a calendar year. So when we were trying to figure out when we wanted to go live, we didn't want to go live in the first quarter because that's still a super busy time for our accounting group, kind of getting the 10K all wrapped up. So we actually went live with April data in the month of May. So in our eyes, that was kind of the safest way to do it because we're in the first month of a new quarter. And that was going to give us the most possible time to work out any issues we might run into until we had to file a queue on this new tool. And it's not like there wasn't the previous month's data there. We moved all that data. So that's why we picked the April data in May as kind of our go live date. We felt it was the safest and gave us the most wiggle room before we had to do any reporting, external reporting on those numbers.
Makes sense, thank you. And maybe we've got time for, I think, one more. Let's see, Rosemary had asked, did you have a mature data warehouse that was used by Hyperion and now by OneStream?
So we have a data warehouse that has a lot of information in it. It's kind of just I'll say a replication from all our different JDE environments into a bunch of tables. So it's got all this information. It's there. The problem is it's not very clean, and the reason that it's not clean is because a lot of our JDE source system data isn't clean. So a lot of cat codes and things like that aren't set up. And in the Hyperion world, we were trying to use the data warehouse to load to one of those Essbase cubes that we had for our commercial reporting. And because there's nothing really cleansing the data as it goes into the data warehouse, we're just kind of taking bad data that's in the local system that flows through to the data warehouse. And then we were trying to bring that into an Essbase cube with really no way to kind of clean or map that data. So that was another reason that we really liked OneStream when we looked at the product was, they have that mapping tool that's really intuitive, really easy to use, that people are used to, our users are going to be used to using that for their actuals, for their trial balance information. So as we were starting to look at, one of the phase 2 things that was on the slide there was this analytic blend, and it's kind of what we're trying to do for our commercial reporting. So we are connected now to our data. We have a direct connection to our data warehouse in OneStream as well. I'll say the big difference is that we have a little bit more flexibility now in OneStream to clean and map that data that we didn't have before in Hyperion.
We'll go ahead and wrap things up here today. We're very happy and grateful that you spent some time with us today to talk about the things that we were able to accomplish with the help of the IDEX team and realize their goals of moving from Hyperion to OneStream. On the screen, once the poll is closed, you'll see our contact information for Phil and I, should you have any additional questions that you want to ask us. And then we also have on the screen some past webinars that might be of interest to you, specifically to some things that we spoke to earlier in this presentation. But thank you again for joining us today, and please be on the lookout for future webinars that we have through Finit. And thank you to the IDEX team for joining us. This is great to have the client experience and really get some direct feedback to the audience from your experience. So thank you.